הניסים ועל הברכן ועל הגבורות ועל התשועות ועל הנפלאות, על הניסים ועל הברכן ועל הגבורות ועל התשועות ועל הנפלאות שעשית לאבותינו בימים ההם בזמן הזה, בזמן הזה שעשית לאבותינו בימים ההם בזמן הזה.
Welcome to Jewish Life, a program presented in cooperation with the Jewish Community Relations Council of New York. And my name is Stewart Ain. Every week at this time, we present programs of particular interest to the Jewish community. Today, we're going to be speaking about the Illinois Holocaust Museum and Education Center with Susan Abrams. She is the CEO. And George Brent, he's a Holocaust survivor who had a role in, I'll talk to you about it in a moment. It's a special project. I don't think that there are many Holocaust museums in the country, but Susan, am I right? There is no other with a virtual reality like this?
That is correct, Stuart. No other. We will be debuting on January 27th, first in the world, where we have archived and share testimony where you can, with your virtual reality, literally walk Auschwitz, Mauthausen, and Ebensee concentration camps with George, who is here with us today as he narrates his experience.
Right, that's January 2022. 2022. And so this program will be seen many times. So I just want to make that clear. And and they do it in connection with the Holocaust, International Holocaust Remembrance Day.
Correct.
That was set up by the UN. And so that's great. And so, I mean, we've seen holograms before. We talked about that on this program, and we actually saw some of the holograms. But this is mind-boggling, right? It's totally different. You put on a headset. Can you describe it to me?
Yes, absolutely. When you come to the museum in our brand new virtual reality gallery, which is actually under our core exhibition, and our artifact of a rail car and the train tracks that took these victims to the concentration camps is where the gallery is set. You put on the headset and you are transported with George as he narrates his experiences. You're standing with him in his hometown as he talks about his happy childhood. He'll tell you more himself. And then the journey by rail car arriving at Auschwitz as he shares the arc of his horrific experiences there, and bringing you forward to today and his hope for the future of why it's so important to share these stories. But nowhere else can you literally, virtually walk with a survivor and have this intimate and moving experience.
And you juxtapose what it looks like today with what it looked like back then. Is that right?
Yes. So, we filmed on location, and that shows you what the camps look like today. But, that they looked very different then. And, with all of the mates and others there. And so as we're standing on the arrival ramp, we're able to overlay an historical image in the exact location that shows you this scene as thousands were unloaded from rail cars onto this arrival ramp at Auschwitz. And we're able to do that in a couple of different locations to give you an indication of much more what it looked like then. No green grass, as Fritzi, one of the two survivors who embarked on this project with us, would say. They would have eaten the grass or the bark off the trees.
Right. That's right. I was going to mention that. Another survivor told me that. They went to Auschwitz and they said, this is not Auschwitz. You got a grass here. Right. That was the first thing she said she saw and said,
Yeah.
We would have eaten the grass. So absolutely. George, did you actually go back to, or you just you did the taping here?
No, it was all taped before. They inserted me with a green screen into the pictures. And while they did that, I was telling my story of the places I've been to, the other camps that I visited, quote unquote.
You visited. Well, you're 92 years old now, but you have you're able to recall it vividly. What happened to you?
Pretty much. So I spoke about it for over 10 years at the museum to school children plus other groups. So and I sometimes add to it, sometimes I subtract. Depends what happens. I have no script. It's all from memory.
Well, now, when you made the recording for the virtual reality, that was scripted?
Yes, sort of. I've told my story, and then as they showed pictures of the particular film, they made me say a few words that were part of the story that they were showing. So depending whether it was in Auschwitz or in Abrams or in Mauthausen or what have you. And then they said, well, now say this and say that. So they had to take it in piecemeal. It was quite difficult. It's much easier just to go on and tell you the story instead of being interrupted and say, now I say a couple of words and then another couple of words to make a story out of it with the picture.
Right, right.
We've heard George tell his story so many times that we knew the story arc and wanted to make sure that we captured certain elements of it. And so George is right. He was asked to repeat things many times to make sure that we had it in a lot of different ways that would fit the arc of the narration and visuals of the filming on site. Yes, and as George said, Stewart, we filmed him in a green screen. And Fritzy too, we filmed with a green screen, and we also filmed on site at Auschwitz.
Right, Fritzy was 13 years old when she was taken. Yeah, that's and unfortunately she passed away in June of 2020.
21, just this past summer.
Yeah, right. And but you also have a hologram there, correct?
We do. Let me see if I can change the background of to show you the hologram. This is right now. Well, I guess we're just seeing part of it now.
Right.
But that is part of Aaron Elster, I guess the shape of the photo. And so Aaron, you could come to our museum and to our holographic theater, and you hear a brief intro video from Aaron or Fritzy or others in which they narrate in about 7 minutes their story, and then lean forward in the seat you see behind me and say, but I have so many more questions. So I have so much more to tell you. So please ask me questions. And there's the briefest of pauses as this switches to interactive mode. And then, you know, you'll see in the audience, one hand goes up, then 3 and 5, and question after question is answered by Aaron or Fritzy, and through their hologram in real time. It is quite amazing. The audience is really enthralled.
They've recorded all the answers, and the machine is able to know which one to plug in. Yes.
Custom voice recognition software. Yes.
Right. Now, did you do that one too, George? No.
Ooh, no,
a hologram?
I wasn't in the hologram.
No, but this is so. You've seen them both? Which do you prefer, one or the other?
Yes, I saw that. Yeah, but which one do I like better?
Yeah,
I'm a little prejudiced because I'm in it, so obviously. Yes, but yeah, basically I'm telling my story. While originally it was planned that I go along with the film crew and go to my hometown and go to the Auschwitz, to Ebensee and to Mauthausen personally and tell my story. But then we decided, since I was close to 90, that it's just a little bit too much to travel. So they filmed all these places. And after the film was finished, they got a studio with a green screen and a year ago, I think. They put me into the green screen.
And you were there.
Then I was there, and then they
Right.
told me, well, now we're going to show this, and so you say a few words about it, and blah blah blah. It was quite challenging to do it.
Right, right,
It's much
right.
easier just to talk about something and talk the whole story in one clean swoop, so to speak. But when you interrupt it all the time, it's kind of difficult. But I think they managed to do it.
Now you were in a number of camps, including
Well,
Mauthausen, right?
1, 2, 3 of them.
3 of them. And we have pictures of Mauthausen, or did you do the other 2 as well?
I beg your pardon?
Do they have pictures of the other 2, or just basically Mauthausen?
They're all of them. They have pictures of Auschwitz.
They did. Oh, wow.
Auschwitz, Mauthausen, and Abrams.
Ebenze. And Stewart, it's not pictures. When you put on the headset, it's 360 degree filming.
Yeah.
So when George
Yeah,
is
they are.
talking about Ebenze and how he worked as a slave laborer in the tunnel, you're in the tunnel and you can turn your head 360. You can look up, down, all around and see what he saw. You're literally there in the tunnel with him as he's narrating, or again, wherever you are at Mauthausen, you can look all around. And so that is part of what is so remarkable about this, that you drive your own experience where you're looking, but you're enveloped. It is as though, as real as can be, as though you are standing on the ground with George as he's narrating his various experiences, whether in the barracks when his father came to find him for what he thought was the last time, and George can share that story with you. But that's part of why that film experience is called Don't Forget Me, based on the words that his father said to him.
And I see in the background, that's where people will sit. They sit in that, and then they put that
you can
headset
see
on.
the blue seats behind me.
Yeah.
You walk into this gallery and you have these picture frames. And when you put on the headset, the narration begins with George sharing his story. And as he does, the picture frames are populated and you see some historical photos. And then George talks about, actually, which is a remarkable story, how he found photos of his family in what is called the Auschwitz Album. There are so few photos that exist. And the story of how he saw that his family was included is quite remarkable. And some of those photos populate the frames, and then George appears and narrates the story, and it fades away. And at the very end, the story closes with some present day photos of George and his family as he shares why it's so important to learn from the past.
What intrigued me in your reading your bio, George, was that 2 great aunts never left their home, survived the war, and you went to stay with them after the war. How did you manage to?
If you remember the history of the Hungarian Jews, we were the last ones that were deported from Europe. By that time, Europe was practically a Judenfrei, as the Germans will say. But Budapest was the only city where they ran out of time, that they didn't deport all of the Jews. Out of the 700,000 Jews in Hungary, about 300,000 were left in Budapest. They separated them into special homes with stars and what have you. And so the 2 of my aunts somehow stayed in their home. And when I returned from the camp, I remember their addresses, and in my Nazi uniform that I had on, I walked in after a year being in camps and surprised them. And they said they didn't recognize me at first, of course, but it was quite a scene.
I can believe it. I believe it because
she was coming down the stairs, and I was standing downstairs, and I said, "Do you know who I am?" And
wow!
That's how we, for a while. I mean, I spent some time with another aunt, and my story is quite convoluted, and this was the first time after I returned from a camp from Abrams.
Right. So you never went to a DP camp either,
Yes, I did.
did you? Oh, you did.
After I found my father, that's another story. How I managed to find him. He stayed alive. He was very, very sick. He was in a TB sanatorium in occupied Germany by the Americans near Munich. And I was only 15, 16 years old, so they separated me. I couldn't stay in a TB sanatorium with my father.
Right.
Put me in a children's center, in a DP camp. And I became a displaced person. And I was
Oh, I see. Right. So, yes.
Yeah, and I spent about a year or two in that camp with guys and girls of my age. It was quite an experience in a beautiful hotel in Bavaria.
And right, in Bavaria. Can you just give us, I know it's a convoluted story, but a little bit of what you went through and how you managed to survive the Holocaust?
I was, first of all, I think the fact that I was so young, I was only not 15 years old when I was in the camp itself in Auschwitz. They put me with children of my age, and they quarantined us for a while because the Germans are very sensitive about bringing some disease into the camp. So they weeded out the ones who were sick and immediately killed them. And so I stayed in this quarantine for a while. Then they put me into a regular men's camp, as they call it, where the men were kept. And that was in the same camp that the gypsies were in. I was watching in the summer of 1944 when the gypsies were liquidated. They killed all the gypsies. The gypsies were the only ones who stayed together as a family with children. The men were taken and for work, I suppose, and the wives and the women and children. One night they closed the camp and the trucks came and they took them to the gas chambers and the crematory. So they killed all the gypsies.
Yeah.
Zigeuner lager, they call it.
But you and your father were kept alive, but your mother and sister.
Well, my father, as Susan said, the first day after we arrived, we stayed together, then they separated us and we came to say goodbye. I found out later he was shipped to Warsaw to clean up the ghetto that was destroyed in 1943. I think there was an uprising. And I was left in Auschwitz. Fortunately, I found an uncle who was very, very clever, and he became what they call a Schreiber in German. He got an armband with this a Schreiber, meaning he was in the office. And he always helped me out with the extra food. He warned me if there's going to be another selection, because the original selection at the ramp was only the first one. Then they selected later on again and again till they weeded out all the sick ones and the ones who were strong enough to work.
Right.
And I spent the summer of 1944 in Auschwitz. And they moved us to a place it was called the Riddeltal in Silesia, in a coal mining camp, a small camp. My uncle went first. I somehow followed him. I don't know how I found out where he went, but I volunteered to go. And he again became a Schreiber, and he assigned me to take care of the barracks of the SS guards. Was a wonderful job. Being indoors, it was getting cold, it was fall.
And you got food.
Some extra food.
Right.
And they got packages from home. And my job was to keep their little room where they were, about 3 or 4 of them, spick and span, and shine their boots and clothes.
Keep the SS happy.
Yeah, absolutely. they were older SS. They were the young Waffen-SS that fought on the front. These were all guards, the Totenkopf they call them. And then January came, and it was terribly cold, and the Russians were getting closer and closer, so they evacuated the camps from the east to the west. They marched us from Auschwitz, or Riedel, which is near Auschwitz, to a railroad station. I think it was Gleiwitz, if I'm not mistaken, near Auschwitz, and put us in these open coal cars. We had a roof. It was the only thing we had was snow to eat because we were thirsty. There was no food or nothing, and they shipped us to Mauthausen.
Right, right.
And again, by that time, all these camps in the east, in the west, were overloaded with people that were evacuated from the east because of the Russians were getting closer. And after a number of weeks in Mauthausen, they made us carry these heavy boulders of stone. It was a quarry up those stairs. I remember, was it 94 or 97 stairs or something? It's still there.
Really?
It's probably going to stand there for another 100 years. It's built of
Yeah.
stone, the whole camp. And afterwards, it was so crowded, they had to make room for more people. So they shipped us to Ebensee, which was a sub-camp of Mauthausen.
Yes.
It was in a beautiful, beautiful Salzkammergut, if you've been in Austria, near Linz. And by that time, it was really getting serious. There was no room, there was no food, there was hard work. We had to work in these tunnels that we were building for the war effort. They were putting.
Did you know that the war was almost over at that point? We're talking about May of
Well, I
45.
sort of. I don't think I found out about the invasion. It happened in June '44. Sometimes in 1945, close to the time when it was ended. No, it was a big secret. They didn't talk about it. And I was busy keeping alive, worrying about political.
Well, when you look back now and you see this virtual reality exhibit and you see yourself talking there, can you believe it? Do you think you wanted other people to appreciate what you went through and to realize it? And you think it did that? Does it do it?
Well, I think it was the effect it made, not just the virtual reality thing that we show, but also throughout the years when I was speaking about my experiences, I sort of painted a picture with words about what I went through. And after they saw it now with that mask on and see it, how it looks today, it looks completely different, of course, the way it does now than the time when I was actually there. But it's close enough to give us an idea of what the thing looked like. Especially Ebensee, I was upsetting me to go back, and I went back to this camp, except for Auschwitz. The other camps I went back a number of times to visit with my wife. And I walk up to Ebensee and I said, "So where's the camp?" But they tore it down, first of all, completely, and it was occupied by beautiful little homes with people walking down the street. And many of them don't even remember or know that there is a place where Ebensee concentration camp stood. And this story, I don't know if I ever told, but on my way out of Hungary, when I was able to leave Hungary to get to my father, there was a stopover, and guess where they put us? Into the Ebensee concentration camp. It was still standing at the time, and I was put in one of the barracks that I occupied when I was a prisoner. So that was another side story, I guess, because there are so many
Right.
other stories that happened to me, but that's one of them. And I was upset about the fact that Abrams, a horrible camp where 30,000 or more people were liberated, that were half dead already. And finally, Patton's Third Army came and liberated us on May the 6th, 7th, whatever that was. But they left
And
us.
it's gone. Yeah.
Yeah, just the war was ending.
Sure.
And I see that here are the little Austrian young couples walking there with children down the place where I was doing all this horrible work in the tunnels.
So so you really believe it's important to keep Auschwitz and to keep it alive.
Yes, but you know what's left of Abrams, really left? They have a little place somewhere in the woods where the gate itself, that was the gate to the camp, is kept with a few other memorabilia that they saved, that was part of the Abrams concentration camp. That's all there is left of it. So at the tunnels, of course, are the big evidence that what was going on. Of course, it looks nicely. It's cleaned up, and it's totally different. If you really look at it the way it looked before, it was a horrible place.
Sure.
Sure. All and we had axes and pickaxes that you had to by hand break the stone and build these tunnels for the Nazis to put their guns and war things.
So Fritzi, also like George, was at Auschwitz, and she worked in a sub camp in a factory with 599 other dirty, head-shaven, starving women. And she was the youngest of them. She actually entered Auschwitz at age 13, but probably her life was saved by somebody who whispered to her, say you're 15, because otherwise as a 13-year-old, she would have gone straight to the gas chamber. So she was the youngest of these laborers in this work camp, part of the Auschwitz-Birkenau complex. And as the youngest, these 599 other women thought that perhaps she would have the best chance of any of them of surviving and telling the world this unbelievable, crazy story, horrible story of what happened to them. And so each night, the 599 women would line up and they would give Fritzi one crumb of their meager bread ration. All those crumbs together, the 599, were the size of a large marble. And in exchange, Fritzi promised them that if she survived, she would share their story. And so while it took her years after of coming to America to get to the point, where she was able to do that, she dedicated much of her adult life to sharing the story, to remember the past in order to, for the museum's, short version of our mission statement, to transform the future, which I know is part of what, drives George too, to create that world where never again could be a reality for all people. So when the holograms came out, she was able to share that story and have visitors for today, but for future generations, ask her these questions and hear from her about it. And it was a weight off her shoulders.
This is great. I really appreciate you taking the time. The Illinois Holocaust Museum and Education Center. We've been speaking with Susan Abrams. She is the CEO, and also George Brent. He's a Holocaust survivor who you'll see if you go to the museum. You'll see him in the virtual reality exhibit. Thank you so much, and good luck to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
This has been Jewish Life. My name is Stewart Ain. Until next week, have a good one.